I am Emma, a 32-year-old woman who has spent the last decade building a respectable career from the ground up, only to be entirely erased by my own bloodline for the sake of social climbing. It all shattered when my brother begged, "Please don't he come to my wedding." "Why?" I asked, staring at the glossy invitation clutched in my hands. He smirked, his eyes scanning my uniform before he spat out the words that broke my soul. "I don't want people to know you are just a cleaner." Before I could even process the cruelty of his words, my mother stepped forward, her voice colder than ice. "We've already taken care of it, Emma," we told his in-laws that you died in a tragic car accident 10 years ago. "It is better this way. Never contact us again." They wanted me dead to the world, a shameful secret buried beneath their grand illusions of high society. I left their house that night in absolute tears, the agonizing sting of their betrayal burning deep in my chest, but they completely underestimated the weight of the truth. On the grand wedding day, as I sat alone in my quiet apartment, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It was a relentless barrage of 94 missed calls from my brother, my mother, and relatives. Their previous arrogance completely replaced by absolute unadulterated panic. They were sobbing, begging me to come and save them from the catastrophic nightmare that had just unfolded at the altar. They had no idea that the very woman they buried alive held the keys to their entire future. Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I am curious to see how far this story will travel. To understand how a mother and a brother could look into the eyes of their own flesh and blood and declare her dead to the world, you have to understand the toxic environment I escaped. For over 10 years, I have worked at the Vance Tower, a soaring 90s Tory luxury commercial high rise in the heart of downtown Chicago. I am not just a cleaner. I am the head of facilities and cleaning operations, commanding a dedicated team of 25 staff members. My days begin at 5 in the morning, ensuring that the sprawling executive boardrooms, the pristine glass windows, and the high-tech corporate offices are immaculate. I take immense pride in my work. My team respects me because I never ask them to do anything I wouldn't do myself, and my office walls are adorned with 3 consecutive exemplary service certificates awarded by the building as corporate management. To me, keeping a workspace immaculate is an honorable, vital profession that keeps the wheels of corporate America turning smoothly. But to my mother, Margaret, and my younger brother, Tyler, my honest labor was an embarrassing stain on their desperate attempts to project an image of old money elitism. My mother had been obsessed with social status ever since my father passed away, leaving behind a struggling family manufacturing business. Instead of working hard to rebuild it, she poured all her energy and what remained of our savings into grooming Tyler to marry into wealth, while completely dismissing my financial contributions that actually kept our roof over our heads. The nightmare truly began on a crisp autumn evening when I drove out to my mother's suburban home. I had received a brief phone call from her the previous day announcing Tyler's engagement, and despite our strange relationship, I genuinely wanted to celebrate my brother's happiness. As I walked up to the front porch, the front door was slightly ajar, and the animated voices of my family drifted out into the cold night air. They were discussing the wedding arrangements, specifically the guest list for the prominent Vance family. Tyler had somehow managed to charm Sophia Vance, the youngest daughter of Victor Vance, the multi-billionaire real estate tycoon who owned half the city, skyline, including the very tower where I worked. I stepped into the warm living room, offering a genuine smile and a cheerful greeting, only to be met with immediate suffocating tension. The coffee table was buried under luxury silk seating charts and designer catering menus. Tyler immediately stood up, his face flushing with irritation as he demanded to know why I hadn't called ahead. When I warmly congratulated him and mentioned that I hadn't received my formal invitation yet, the room fell into a dead, horrifying silence. My mother and brother exchanged a long, guilty glance before my mother cleared her throat, adjusted her designer pearls, and calmly informed me that my profession presented a major obstacle. She told me that the Vance family belonged to an elite traditional circle with strict expectations, and that having a daughter who cleaned floors would completely ruin Tyler's chances of securement. When I defensively argued that I was a respected head of operations, Tyler laughed right in my face, delivering the ultimate blow. He coldly stated that they had already finalized the narrative for the Vance family. I was dead, killed in a horrific car crash on the UI-90 highway a decade ago, and my presence at the wedding would destroy everything. The sheer calculated cruelty of their words paralyzed me. I stood there looking at the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, realizing they had willingly traded my existence for a billionaire's approval. I walked out of that house into the freezing rain, my tears blinding me as I drove back to the city, the heavy weight of their absolute rejection crushing my soul. The days following that horrific encounter were a blur of deep psychological torment. Snorts every time I closed my eyes. I heard my mother's emotionless voice declaring me dead, and my brother's arrogant smirk as he protected his fragile ego. I threw myself entirely into my work, using the physical demands of managing Vance Tower to numb the agonizing ache in my chest. I polished glass until my arms ached and organized inventory until midnight, desperately trying to convince myself that my value came from my character, not from their twisted validation. But my family wasn't finished weaponizing their narcissism against me. 3 days before the scheduled wedding, the sharp ring of my apartment doorbell shattered the silence of my Sunday afternoon. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach instantly knotted into a tight ball of anxiety. It was Margaret and Tyler dressed in tailored designer outfits, standing on the welcome mat of my modest but impeccably clean city apartment. The moment I opened the door, Tyler didn't even bother to greet me. He simply pushed past me into my living room, scanning my space with an expression of pure condescension. My mother followed him, her eyes immediately landing on the framed certificates of excellence hanging proudly on my wall, her mouth twisting into a subtle sneer of disapproval. They had not come to offer an apology or to heal the massive rift they had created. They were there to enforce their cruel boundaries. Tyler turned to me, crossing his arms over his expensive cashmere sweater, and demanded a binding promise that I would stay completely hidden during the upcoming weekend. He explained that Sophia's father, Victor Vance, was a notoriously meticulous man who valued traditional family history, and that if any of his high society associates saw me in downtown Chicago during the wedding festivities, the entire facade would collapse. When I looked at my brother, remembering how I had sacrificed my own college savings years ago to pay off his reckless credit card debts when he was struggling, the sheer injustice of the situation made my blood boil. I asked him directly if he truly felt no shame in erasing his own sister just to secure a multi-million-dollar inheritance. Through marriage, Tyler merely laughed, a sinister defensive sound, and told me that my simple, low-class perspective couldn't comprehend the stakes of high society networking. My mother interjected, her tone dripping with artificial disappointment, warning me that my selfish pride and need for attention were threatening to ruin the family. As ultimate financial salvation, she told me that if I truly loved my brother, I would willingly play the role of the deceased sibling for just 2 short weeks. That was the exact moment something vital snapped inside of me. The crippling sadness that had consumed me for days suddenly crystallized into a cold, unbreakable shield of absolute dignity. I looked at the strangers standing in my living room, refusing to shed a single tear in their presence. I calmly pointed toward the front door and told them to leave, dictating that their fragile, pathetic world built on lies would eventually catch up to them. They walked out, tossing parting threats about cutting me off financially and emotionally forever, entirely unaware that their desperate house of cards was already catching the wind. The morning after the confrontation in my apartment, the universe threw a massive wrench into the grand machinery of Vance Tower. It was a Tuesday, and at precisely 6 a.m, a massive water pipe burst on the restricted 40th floor, which housed the main executive boardrooms of the Vance Corporation. This wasn't just a minor leak. It was an absolute operational crisis. Millions of dollars worth of antique mahogany conference tables, rare modern artwork, and sensitive electronic server systems were completely threatened by cascading water. Just 48 hours before a crucial international investment summit, while the building's corporate executives panicked in their tailored suits, I immediately sprang into action. I mobilized my entire emergency response cleaning team, donning my standard utility uniform, heavy-duty boots, and grabbing industrial water extraction vacuums. For 4 grueling hours, I led the charge on the flooded executive floor. I was down on my hands and knees, directing my staff with military precision, successfully diverting the water, drying the invaluable hardwood floors, and utilizing specialized restoration techniques to ensure not a single piece of corporate property was permanently damaged. By 10 o'clock, the boardroom was completely immaculate, smelling of fresh citrus and polished wood, with no trace of the chaotic flood remaining. As I was wiping down the final glass partition, my hair slightly disheveled, and my uniform damp from the intense physical labor, a deep, commanding voice resonated from the entrance of the boardroom. I turned around to find Victor Vance himself standing there. The multi-billionaire real estate tycoon looked exactly as he did in the financial magazines. Impeccably tailored, with sharp gray eyes and an aura of absolute authority. Beside him stood his son, Richard, who was Tyler's future brother-in-law, looking thoroughly impressed by the rapid restoration of the room. Victor walked directly over to me, completely ignoring the higher-level building managers who were desperately trying to take credit for the cleanup. He looked at my name tag, which read Emma Langford, Head of Operations, and a look of profound respect crossed his face. He extended his hand, completely unbothered by the fact that my fingers were slightly damp from cleaning, and thanked me for saving his executive floor from a catastrophic financial loss. Victor Vance then did something that completely shocked his entourage. He asked his assistants to leave the room so he could personally speak with me. He sat down on the edge of the conference table and shared that he deeply appreciated hardworking leaders because 3 generations ago, his own grandfather had started as a manual factory laborer in Detroit. He emphasized that in the Vance family, honest labor and absolute integrity were held in higher regard than any empty aristocratic title. Then Victor casually shifted the conversation, mentioning that his son Richard was getting married that very weekend to a young woman whose family shared my exact last name, Langford. He looked at me with genuine curiosity, asking if I was perhaps related to them. My heart instantly leaped into my throat, a suffocating wave of panic washing over me. I stood before the most powerful tycoon in Chicago, knowing that my mother and brother had pronounced me dead to his family. Victor shook his head sadly, continuing to explain that Tyler had told them his older sister had tragically passed away in a car crash on the I-90 highway 10 years ago, leaving their mother utterly devastated. He expressed deep sympathy, stating how much he wished that sister were still alive to witness the union, because family legacy meant everything to him. I felt a massive wave of nausea hit me. The sheer irony of the situation was dizzying. Here was the billionaire tycoon expressing profound respect for my honest profession, completely unaware that my own family had buried me alive out of fear, that he would look down on them. I faced a massive internal conflict. Part of me wanted to scream the truth right there, but my professional boundaries and the sheer shock of the moment kept my lips sealed. I simply offered a tight, polite nod, stating that Langford was a common name, and quickly excused myself to return to my duties. But as I walked away, I noticed Victor's sharp gray eyes narrowing slightly, his intense gaze lingering on my face, as if his brilliant corporate mind had just detected a massive, inexplicable anomaly. The Saturday of the grand wedding arrived, shrouded in a heavy, overcast Chicago fog that perfectly mirrored the somber quiet of my apartment. I had taken a rare mandatory day off from Vance Tower, choosing to spend the morning in complete isolation. I brewed a strong cup of black coffee, sat on my sofa, and stared out the window at the gray waters of Lake Michigan. In that exact moment, across town at the ultra-luxurious Fairmont Hotel, my brother was likely standing at the altar in a bespoke tuxedo, preparing to exchange vows with a billionaire's daughter, while my mother basked in the reflected glory of high society. They were celebrating their grandest triumph, built entirely upon the fictional grave they had dug for me. I felt a profound sense of peace, mixed with a lingering ache. I was proud of my clean apartment, my honest career, and my unyielding dignity. Yet, the sting of being cast out by my own flesh and blood was a wound that time would take long to heal. At exactly 11 o'clock in the morning, the precise hour the formal wedding ceremony was scheduled to commence, the silence of my apartment was shattered. My mobile phone, sitting on the coffee table, began to vibrate violently. I glanced at the screen, expecting a routine operational update from my weekend shift supervisor at the tower. Instead, my eyes widened in complete shock. The caller ID read Tyler. I chose to ignore it, setting the phone face down, refusing to allow his toxic energy to disrupt my hard-earned peace. But the phone didn't T-stop the moment the first call disconnected. It immediately began to ring again, Then a text message flashed across the screen from my mother, typed in desperate, frantic capital letters. Emma, pick up the phone. Now, our lives are completely ruined. Toast, please. Within the span of 45 minutes, my phone became an absolute weapon of relentless disruption. It rang continuously, accumulating an astonishing 94 missed calls. There were 15 missed calls from Tyler, 22, from my mother, and the rest were from aunts, cousins, and even unknown corporate numbers associated with the Vance enterprise. The voicemails began piling up, filled with the sounds of muffled weeping, chaotic background screaming, and glass shattering. Realizing that something historically catastrophic had occurred, my hand trembled slightly as I finally swiped the screen to answer the 95th call, which came directly from Tyler. The moment the line connected, I didn't hear the voice of the arrogant, snobbish corporate climber who had sneered at my uniform days prior. Instead, I was met with the sound of a completely broken man sobbing hysterically, his hyperventilating breaths ragged with pure, unadulterated terror. Emma, please, you have to get to the Fairmont Hotel right now. I am begging you on my knees. Please save me. Snorts! He screamed through his tears, his voice echoing off the walls of my quiet apartment. I remained completely calm, my voice cold as ice as I reminded him that, according to his own strict instructions, I was supposed to be a deceased victim of a car crash and that ghosts could attend high society weddings. Tyler let out a pathetic, desperate wail explaining that their entire house of cards had just suffered a devastating, fatal implosion at the altar. He revealed that Victor Vance had not achieved a multi-billion-dollar net worth by being a gullible man. Following our brief, emotionally charged encounter in the executive boardroom days earlier, Victor's legendary intuition had been deeply triggered, suspicious of my sudden paleness and the striking facial resemblance between myself and the photographs of Tyler's mother. Victor had quietly ordered his global corporate security team to execute an immediate deep-dive forensic background check on the Langford family before signing the massive multi-million-dollar corporate merger and family trust agreements tied to the marriage. The security firm had easily unearthed the truth within 24 hours. Emma Langford was very much alive, possessed a pristine legal record, and was currently employed as a highly respected head of operations right inside Victor's own crown jewel commercial tower. Victor Vance had realized that his daughter was about to marry into a family of profound, pathologically narcissistic liars who were willing to legally and socially erase their own hardworking daughter out of sheer toxic classism. The billionaire had marched into the bridal suite an hour before the ceremony, confronting my mother and brother with a complete background dossier, threatening to cancel the entire wedding, withdraw his massive corporate investments, and publicly blacklist Tyler from the entire North American business sector unless I appeared at the venue immediately to verify the situation. My family, who had buried me alive to protect their social status, now needed my living breath to save them from complete, irreversible ruin. I hung up the phone, a profound, chilling clarity washing over me. I stood up, walked over to my bedroom closet, and pulled out an elegant midnight blue silk gown that I had originally purchased months ago for a close colleague's wedding, but had never worn. I styled my hair into a flawless, sophisticated updo, applied minimal but sharp makeup, and stepped into a high-end black car service. I was not rushing to the Fairmont Hotel to save my brother's pathetic corporate ambitions or to preserve my mother's desperate illusions of social status. I was driving there to reclaim my name, to exhume myself from the fictional grave they had dug for me, and to deliver absolute, uncompromising justice. When the car pulled up to the majestic white facade of the Fairmont Hotel on Nob Hill, the atmosphere outside the grand ballroom was already thick with palpable scandal. Wealthy guests in designer tuxedos and extravagant gowns were huddled in small, frantic groups in the marble lobby, whispering furiously to one another as security guards kept the massive double doors of the main ballroom firmly shut. The moment I pushed past the heavy oak doors and stepped into the grand ballroom, the entire room fell into an immediate, breathless silence. The setting was breathtakingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers cast a brilliant glow over thousands of white orchids, and a massive ice sculpture of the Vance and Langford family crests stood melting in the corner. In the center of the room, the wedding party was trapped in an agonizing standoff. Sophia Vance stood in her exquisite lace bridal gown, her face completely ruined by tears, comforted by her older brother, Richard. My mother, Margaret, looked as if she had been turned to ash, her hands shaking so violently. that her diamond bracelets clattered together. Tyler was slumped against a floral pillar, his tailored tuxedo, disheveled, looking entirely defeated. On the opposite side stood Victor Vance, looking like an absolute emperor of industry, surrounded by his personal legal team and corporate security personnel. The moment my mother saw me enter, a desperate, sickening flash of hope crossed her pale face. She frantically rushed toward me, grabbing my arm with a tight, suffocating grip, whispering frantically into my ear, begging me to play along with a new lie. She wanted me to tell Victor that I had been estranged in a psychiatric facility or an international commune for 10 years. Anything to explain why they thought I was dead, promising that if I saved Tyler's marriage now, they would reward me with millions of dollars once the trust fund was secured. I looked down at her claw, like hand on my silk dress, and with absolute calm deliberation, I removed her fingers from my arm. I walked right past her, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor until I stood directly in front of Victor Vance and my broken brother. I looked Victor dead in the eyes and spoke with a voice that resonated clearly to the very back of the silent ballroom. Mr. Vance, I am Emma Langford. I am the woman your security team found, and I am here to tell you the unvarnished truth. I pulled out my phone, unlocked the screen, and activated the speaker, playing a crystal clear audio recording of the voicemail my mother had left on my phone just days prior during their apartment visit. My mother's cruel, arrogant voice echoed through the high ceilings of the luxury ballroom. Emma, you are a common cleaner, an absolute embarrassment to this family. Future, we have told the Vance family you are dead, and if you dare ruin Tyler, wedding with your low-class presence, we will ensure you are entirely cast out forever. The absolute exposure was immediate, devastating, and spectacular. Sophia Vance let out a sharp gasp of pure disgust, instantly pulling her engagement ring off her finger and throwing it directly at Tyler's face. Victor Vance's expression hardened into a terrifying mask of absolute corporate wrath. He stepped forward, looking down at my trembling brother and mother with utter contempt. Victor announced in front of the entire assembly of Chicago's highest elite that the wedding was permanently canceled, effective immediately. Furthermore, he declared that the massive multi-million-dollar corporate merger that was scheduled to inject vital capital into my mother's failing manufacturing business was completely dissolved, and that his legal team would immediately file fraud and misrepresentation lawsuits against Tyler. He looked at Tyler and coldly stated that he was fired from his executive track position at the Vance Corporation, stripped of his security clearances, and permanently blacklisted from every major real estate and financial firm across the state for severe moral turpitude. My mother collapsed onto a nearby velvet chair, clutching her chest as her entire world, her decades of social climbing, her precious reputation, and her family's financial future completely vaporized into nothingness right before her eyes. I stood tall in the center of that ruined ballroom, looking at the two people who had tried to bury me alive, realizing that the cold, absolute weight of my honest truth had just completely crushed their empire of lies. 6 months have passed since the historic implosion at the Fairmont Hotel, and the landscape of my life has completely transformed into a testament of empowerment and resilience. Victor Vance, true to his word as a man who values absolute integrity and operational excellence, recognized that the very qualities that made me a flawless head of cleaning operations were exactly what his national real estate portfolio desperately needed. He personally bypassed his corporate HR department and appointed me as the executive director of corporate facilities and environmental operations for the entire Vance enterprise nationwide. I now oversee the operations of over 200 luxury high-rises across North America, commanding a multi-million-dollar budget and a corporate staff of hundreds. I no longer wear a damp utility uniform. I wear tailored business suits and sit in the very executive boardrooms I once cleaned. But I have never lost my humility or my pride in honest labor. My first corporate act was to implement a comprehensive corporate program that significantly increased wages, healthcare benefits, and educational funding for every single cleaning and maintenance staff member across the entire Vance empire. The fate of my biological family serves as a powerful, unforgivable warning about the true cost of toxic narcissism and classist pride. With the complete dissolution of the Vance corporate merger and the immediate filing of the misrepresentation lawsuits, my mother's struggling manufacturing company plunged into absolute irreversible bankruptcy. Their beautiful suburban home was foreclosed upon by the bank to pay off their massive debts. Today, my mother, Margaret, lives in a cramped, dark, bedroom apartment on the far outskirts of the city, completely abandoned and ignored by the very high society social clubs and elitist friends she spent her entire life worshiping. Tyler's downfall was even more severe, blacklisted from every executive corporate tier in Chicago due to his public exposure of fraud and moral turpitude. He was forced to confront the harsh, unforgiving reality of actually having to perform manual labor to survive. In a spectacular twist of poetic justice, he now works as an level low, wage manual laborer for a third-party commercial waste management company, spending his days handling trash and cleaning facilities, the exact profession he once deemed a shameful stain on his family name. We have not spoken a single word since that fateful day in the ballroom, and I preferred exactly that way. I didn't just win my dignity back. I forged my own permanent empire with my own bare hands and sharp intellect. If there is one profound lesson I want everyone watching this video to take away from my journey, it is this: never allow anyone, even your own family, to make you feel ashamed of your honest labor. True worth isn't inherited through empty status or a privileged bloodline. It is earned through integrity, dedication, and the courage to stand tall in your own truth. Have you ever had a toxic family member try to erase your hard work or treat you like a secret? Share your thoughts and your own stories of empowerment in the comments below. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to stay with us for more incredible stories of absolute justice. Thank you for supporting our channel and our stories. This video is fictional and intended only for entertainment, education, and reflective storytelling. We hope it reminds you that you are low to chew peace, even when all this code is selfish, cold, unforgiving, because they may only be upset that they can no longer